Good afternoon, and welcome to the American Floral Endowment's Grow Pro webinar series. I'm AFE's Research Coordinator, Laura Barth, and I'm pleased to be the moderator for today's special session. Today's session is on using AI tools to create SOPs. On behalf of the Endowment, I'm excited to be a part of AFE's Grow Pro webinar series that features a new topic every month presented by an industry expert. These webinars are free to everyone thanks to the generous support of AFE's sponsors. The views and opinions expressed in these webinars are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of AFE. As an independent nonprofit, AFE cannot endorse any specific product or opinion. Today's webinar is sponsored by Sustainabloom. Sustainabloom leads the floral industry towards sustainability by providing free, accessible resources for all. Backed by top researchers, we offer educational guides, tools, funding information, up-to-date news, and certification information to support sustainable practices at every level. You can learn more and get involved at sustainabloom.org. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor for one of our Grow Pro webinars, you can find that information on AFE's website at endowment.org/growpro. Today's session is by Aaron Phillips of Walters Gardens. After the presentation, Aaron will join us for a Q&A. Feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A feature or chat at any time. We'll answer as many as we can before the end of the hour. Unanswered questions may be answered through a separate email exchange. The session is being recorded and will be shared to AFE's YouTube account. Through YouTube's accessibility features, you can access closed captions in other languages. To get us started, I'd like to share a little bit about today's expert speaker. Aaron Phillips is the Greenhouse Systems Manager at Walters Gardens. He has a bachelor's degree in environmental science from Calvin University and a certificate of greenhouse management from Michigan State University. Aaron started at Spring Meadow Nursery and gained experience in propagation, automation, and tissue culture lab management. At Walters Gardens, Aaron has led teams on projects that include sales forecasting, LED installation, and automation design and implementation. He also has experience in construction project management and business analytics. Currently, he is working on an ERP system streamlining project, researching new automation, and developing analytical tools using generative AI. He is also keeping tabs on tech innovations in horticulture and agriculture through his involvement in the MSU Innovation Center. Aaron, welcome and thank you for presenting today on using AI tools to create SOPs.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for that introduction, and welcome everybody to this special webinar. Let's go ahead and dive in. So yeah, this title is using AI tools to create SOPs. Aaron Phillips, the Greenhouse Systems Manager here at Walters Gardens. Thank you for that intro. I've done a lot of different things, and it's kind of fun tying them all together into ERP and things like AI. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll do a little AI introduction, and then we'll talk about some common generative AI tools. We'll also talk about transcription apps, and then we'll get into SOP template development. These first 3 bullet points are going to go fairly quickly because I would like to spend most of the time on reviewing some examples that I have, and then also digging into something called prompt engineering, and then finally ending on translation. If we have enough time at the end, I'd love to do a live demo. I have a link, and I would love to get some audience feedback. So as we're going through this presentation, start thinking about how this may apply in your role or in your business, and then we can kind of open it up there. So let's go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to ask you a question, and it's kind of rhetorical, so don't worry about commenting or anything, but just kind of do a gut check with yourself. And what do you think when you hear the term AI? Now I'm going to share a series of images, and I want you to do a gut check and kind of see what you're thinking and feeling when you see these, okay? So 3 images, here's the first one, and I'll give you about 5 seconds each. Okay, first one. Here's the second one. And finally, the third one. So those were all examples of something called generative AI. And it's kind of funny, they were all depicting more hardware, right? So the first two were hardware. One is kind of like apocalyptic. One is like this super rosy picture. And the third one is more how we can use them in the greenhouse. So let's start off with a definition of generative AI. It's really any AI tool that generates novel content, okay? So those images were generative, and we also are going to be talking mainly about generative AI from large language models. Here's a little bit of a small outline and how I like to think about how to use generative AI. I really use it as a search, a place for ideas. We'll focus most on generation today. And you can even get into coding and tools using generative AI as well, but that's a whole different presentation. Stick around and I may do something like that in the future. So we'll cross those out today. Search, yeah, just, it's really replacing search tools. This traditional search engines, and a lot of them now have, live links to the internet. They can do their own searches. And it's also just a place to get your ideas down. Write it out, ask some questions, see what it comes back with. It's just kind of a really quick sounding board to see what you can do. And then today, we're going to focus mainly on generation. What are these outputs that we can get from generative AI? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more in detail about generative AI. There's, about 4 main generative AI user interfaces out there right now. When you're talking about, and I'm going to throw a term out there, LLMs, okay? LLM is large language model. It's the backbone, the background of a lot of this, news hype around AI. And it's what is getting a lot of the press coverage. ChatGPT is probably the best known generative AI user interface out there. I really like it for just kind of all around use. Go to it for a lot of different things. Claude is another one. A lot of people don't know about Claude, but I'm actually going to be using that one today. I like it because this generation, it actually creates a separate document, a separate artifact that you can then download and copy. Gemini is from Google. And again, old habits die hard. I've just been using it as a search replacement. I've tried it with some of these other things that I'm using with Claude and ChatGPT, but it doesn't seem like it really keeps up. So it's really good at searching the internet. Let it do what it's good at doing. And then finally, Copilot is an AI layer that integrates with Microsoft. So we're using Microsoft 365, Teams, things like that. And I'll get into that more in a little bit. And then I actually added this one. Out of the blue comes something called DeepSeek. And this is new just in the past few weeks, back to January 20. And it is, the PRC stands for People's Republic of China, okay? So if you've seen this in the news, it's coming out saying that it can do the same thing as all of these other guys for a lot cheaper, but it is tied to a telecoms company that is controlled by the Chinese government. So be really careful with this one. It's already had a major data breach, so just be really careful with it. I think it needs time to play out. But then I designed this little cartoon. It's just kind of funny, Seek Attack, with the other LLM sitting in the boat. But yeah, we can move on from there. Okay, let's get into transcription tools. There are many transcription apps out there. You can have them on your phone, on your computer. A lot of different things you can do. And again, I mentioned that we use Microsoft 365, so I use Word quite a bit. And they're either dictate or transcribe features in Microsoft Word. I use that quite a bit. And again, virtual meetings like this one, this one is being recorded, which is great. So we can do a transcript from this one later. Zoom, Teams, Meet. It's really fun because like we'll set up a Teams meeting and like everybody will be in the room, but we'll record it anyways because then we can transcribe it. So that's kind of fun too. It doesn't necessarily have to be virtual to use the platform. Just kind of fun workaround. Finally, let's put a few of these things together and let's start talking about an SOP template. So what is an SOP? SOP is a standard operating procedure. So if you have a job that needs to get done and you would like some consistency in how you do it day to day, year to year, season to season, an SOP is a really good way to do it. So a few years ago, Walters Gardens developed a standard company-wide SOP. This was from the executive team, HR, some of the managers across the company came up with a standard SOP, and I'll show you what it is in a little bit. There's a few different things you can include in an SOP. You want your title, of course, purpose, scope, definitions, but you really want to focus on the procedure, the standard operating procedure, right? The step-by-step process in here, this is how you do this job. Once you get through that with your team, you want some success metrics. How are we going to measure how successful we are on this project? Some quality, also warnings, safety standards, things like that. And then finally, some responsibilities. Who's in charge of this SOP, this task at hand? And then how, some tools out there to help you develop your SOP. There are a lot of free templates online. It's funny, I'm not a template guy. So when there's, boxes on a sheet of paper, I like to think a little more broadly than that, right? But you can get an idea of what's online right now. And then also just throw AI back into it, right? Ask AI for examples. It will do that search for you, and it will come up with a consolidated list, and then you can see what's up. And then also get your leadership involved. So I mentioned our HR department, our executive team. This is a crucial step for when you're talking about a company-wide SOP. Cool. So this is what ours looks like. Really clear cut. We put a letterhead on it. That's cool. So this is what it looks like. Now we can take that SOP and we can do something cool with it. We can actually lead our meetings with our SOP. So have that SOP in front of you and call your team together and say, hey, either you have an existing SOP that needs review or you are going to start a new SOP. Gather your team, say, hey, we're going to come up with this SOP together. Let's work through these points and see what we can come up with. As this is progressing, make sure that you let your team know that you are either recording or dictating or transcribing the meeting that you're having, okay? And this is golden because a lot of times in the industry and other places too, you have a meeting and like you're lucky if one person has taken some some scant notes and like that's all you got from an hour meeting like that. We can gather some more information, right? And then always ask first. Either ask or at the very minimum let your team know that they're being recorded. And again, it's not for voice recognition software or anything like that. You're really after the words and the terms that are being generated from that transcript. And then so what are we doing with this template? We're generating an SOP, and we are actually going to use it as a tool to feed back into AI. So let's clean up our template, right? Here's our template. let's prepare it for uploading to an AI user interface. I'm gonna cross out the company name, and then I'm also going to cross out any contact information. And this is very crucial, especially if you're going to be either translating or changing an existing SOP that may have that information already inside. Let's continue. So I know that we sped through those 3 bullet points fairly quickly. And the reason is because I really want to get into some of these AI examples. So let's do a quick 10, 15 second breather, brain break. Let that process. Start coming up with some ideas, some examples as we continue. And again, it would be great if we could get to that live demo. So let's continue. So I mentioned, there's a lot of different tools that you can use. I'm going to be focusing on just one today. I want to keep it pretty consistent because it would be fairly confusing if I used a lot of different generative AI models. So I'm going to focus on Claude 3.5 Sonnet with its artifact function. I was traveling with some work friends out to California this fall. And this I saw this in the San Francisco airport, so I had to take a picture of it. So this is Claude. This is what we're going to be seeing today, a jetpack for your thoughts. Okay, that's awesome. And that really is what it is, especially when you're first getting into it. So when you jump on it, this is what it looks like. Good afternoon, Aaron. How can I help you today? I'm not going to focus too much on the little details and functions down below because these are different for each user interface. But I will focus more on the prompt that I'm going to be showing you and the response. Okay. So let's look at an example of this idea of taking a meeting and changing it into an SOP. So right away, you see 2 documents that I've uploaded. One is a transcript from a meeting that I had, and the other one is the blank SOP template. So let's go ahead and read that prompt. First document, it's a transcript. Okay, cool. Explaining what's going on in the meeting. The second one is the SOP template. And then I said, please use the transcript of this meeting information and write an SOP. And that's actually a typo, TTA collision incident, including all important details, leaving out any repeated information. So anytime you upload documents to a user interface, you always want to say what they are and then what to do with them. So kind of a 2-step process there. So this is pretty standard. Let's go ahead and see what it kicked out for us. Now on the right, you can see this the outline of that SOP that I uploaded, right? Okay, cool. Process name, TTA collision incident response. Awesome. Objective, to provide standardized process for responding to and solving collisions. Cool, it's got it. Timeline, should begin immediately upon the detection of a collision. Very cool. It's got all this stuff straight from the meeting transcript. Oversight responsibility, and then finally it goes into the steps. I said, that procedure, that step-by-step process is the most important part. And it continued along with what we laid out. So we can actually ratchet this up a step. So that's a pretty standard example of how you can take a meeting transcript, turn it into an SOP. You can do some other things pretty cool too. So let's get into some operational efficiency things, okay? And again, you can see that there's 2 documents here. And there is something that we do at Walters Gardens called a grid review. Now, these are 2 different inventory managers. They both had their own way of doing this process that's very complicated and convoluted and kind of like, intuition. How can we standardize that a little bit and make this process a little more efficient? So I asked them, when you're doing this process, go ahead and take notes on the steps you're doing and reasons, things like that. So they went ahead and did that, shared their notes with me, excuse me, and I was able to upload them. And I said, take a look at the 2 attached documents. This is for grid review. Please combine the notes into one document. And I said, color code the information based on where it came from. If it's this guy's, color it yellow. If it's this guy's, color it red. And if it comes from both of them, color it green. So this way I can combine their notes without having to go through each document and then type up a new document myself. Let's see what it did. So this is a screenshot of what Claude looks like with that artifact generated to the side. Now, this is exactly why I like Claude, because it has this ability to create a different document that is outside of the chat thread, okay? So you can see my prompt, the documents, awesome, cool. Then it has this thing here called combined grid review process that it generated. It's its separate document. It also gave me a little key. It said yellow, red, green. And then we can review the document that it combined and said, okay, both of the guys had all of this information, which is great. This initial assessment, one guy had this grid review process, the navigation, the other guy had this. And then check for irregularities. Both of the guys do that as well. So at the end, and this was the litmus test, it was great. I sent this document back to both of the guys and said, hey guys, can you take a look at this and let me know if anything is out of place? They said, nope, looks good. They did not call me out and say, hey, did you run this through chat? Like this is a bunch of, this is a bunch of nonsense. But that was the litmus test, and it was kind of fun. So then we worked together, and I told them what I did, and we turned it into a standardized document. All right. Another fun thing you can do is you can actually, I'll get to that in just a sec. So here's the chat controls. You can see these 2 artifacts that Claude actually generated, and you can see the content. So the content is what I've uploaded, and the artifacts are what Claude has generated. Now I asked it to do something fun. I actually took its combined grid review process and fed it back into itself. And I said, take a look at this combined process, look at the original documents and see if there's anything missing. So you can actually refeed it back into the system. And sure enough, there was this one little thing that it picked up, and it added it into the new updated grid review process. I don't like to do this more than one time because AI has the tendency to give you what you want, give you what you ask. And if you keep doing this, it will just keep throwing a bunch of more information in there, and that kind of defeats the purpose of consolidating these documents. So I usually only do it once. Yeah, so that's kind of some of the examples that I can share today. I know that we're moving really fast. We are going to get into something called prompt engineering. This is really interesting, and it is a way to really to break up those prompts into sections so the AI model, the LLM, will understand it a little better. And you can do this really cool trick using XML tags to organize and kind of label your information, okay? So this is what they look like. You can call them the carrots or whatever, brackets. But you can use these things called thinking, or you can give them roles, or you can give it a direction, or you can actually give it an example and then feed it an answer and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is really useful, especially if you're getting into really complicated tasks, okay? So just kind of think of it as a label for the prompt that you're giving to AI, okay? We're going to dive into an example. I'm going to spend a little more time on this one because it is, once you get into prompt engineering, it can get a little heavy. The way that I like to think about it is that, how would I explain this to a coworker? And that's really what it is. It's breaking down your thought process so your coworker can understand it in a better way. AI is the same way. Okay, everybody ready? Take a deep breath, and let's dive in. Okay, so I have a document. This is a massive, massive spreadsheet from USDA Ag Census on a lot of greenhouse product across the country. Sometimes in development, software development, you have a data set that's kind of your benchmark. And this is, I've picked this one up because it's public, anybody can access it. It's very applicable to the hort industry as a whole, state information, things like that, right? So this is my benchmark. How does AI process this massive spreadsheet? Okay. So if you quickly scan my prompt, you can see that I have the XML tags in there. I have a role 1, role 2, directions, and then finally I give it some instruction. Let's read through it. Okay, role 1, data analyst that is specialized in taking state data and organizing by region of the US. Okay, cool. Role 2, sales manager, completely different from data analyst, right? Sales manager of a greenhouse in Kansas, looking for industry trends in the region in order to diversify your SKU offerings. Okay, cool. Now we have a completely separate role. The reason why we do this is because it will look at that data in a different way and pick out different keywords that role is keyed into. Now, directions, this is actually applied to both roles. Analyze the attached data set showing horticultural data for different commodities for each state. And again, I'm telling it what I have given it and what to do with it. All that out of the way, that is what prompt engineering looks like. I have a little bit more embedded in the instructions. So let's get into it. As role 1, data analyst, look at the attached document and determine what commodities are increasing. And this is kind of funny. I did a typo on this. I went back and forth between Iowa and Kansas, and there's actually both of those states in there. It's kind of fun, but you'll see that come out in a little bit. Show your thinking, and then I gave it a new bracket, thinking 1, to determine what states are surrounding Kansas. And then show your process, thinking 2, to determine what commodities are increasing in sales. So you can see I've given it 2 things to think about and how it's going to determine that, okay? And then I said, end with a summary. Okay, that was a lot. You can see how that's laid out, and let's go ahead and look into it. Okay, so thinking 1, to analyze regional trends, it looked at Kansas, Nebraska North, Missouri East, Oklahoma South, Colorado West. I didn't tell it where those states were and what was touching Kansas. It pulled that out. Then also it says this complex data set from 2020 NASS Horticultural Census. And then it looked and said, first I need to identify, then filter, finally analyze year-over-year changes. All of this, if you don't prompt your user interface or your LLM, to show its thinking, you don't know where or how it's pulling its data. So if I did this prompt without that thinking part, I wouldn't have any of that information. It would just go ahead and do it. But this is kind of like, you kind of can crack open the door and seeing a little bit what's going on in the background. And it's really, really useful to see how accurate your prompt is and how accurate the information is that the output actually is. So let's look at it. greenhouse nursery crops. And again, remember role 1, data analyst. Increasing in sales, vegetables and herbs in the broader region, container grown, native plants, food crops, emerging trends, increased demand for locally grown vegetables and herbs. Awesome. We have something that we can go with. So this is how we can use prompt engineering, especially for like a management level task, okay? We talked about sales manager, right? Then I throw a little more at it and I say as role 2. And I don't have to retype that out because it's already baked in there, right? Take the findings of the data analyst and come up with a plan to diversify your portfolio. Important note, you already grow annuals. So from the crops mentioned in the data analyst report, right? Determine what would grow best in the same greenhouse conditions, show your thought process, give a summary. And then I said show thought process, and it gave me more thinking brackets, but it did not label it as thinking 1 or thinking 2 because this is actually different. Current status, growing annuals, controlled temp, existing staff familiar with container growing. And that says analyzing opportunities, protected food crops. You can use similar growing temperatures, use existing infrastructure. Awesome. It is like nailing all of these things. Cool. And again, this is all in thinking. It has not given me the end of its thinking bracket yet. So then let's go to role 3. I'm actually, so in my original prompt, I gave role 1, role 2, but if you're numbering your roles, you can always just keep going. So I introduced a new role, role 3, as greenhouse production manager, specializing in production of greenhouse crops. We're going to take all of this kind of management level data analyst management decision-making process. We're going to take this whole package and we're going to refeed it back into creating an SOP, full circle. Okay, guys? So let's take a look at it. It has created the SOP. As role 3, take the plan from the sales manager and make an SOP artifact using the blank template provided. This is key. If you do not have the correct information, using your best judgment, suggest where the information could come from in the correct space. And then I said, mark it with the pink exclamation emoji. And some of these like little details are just kind of working with your user interface and seeing what it can and can't do. Claude cannot highlight words. It cannot color text, I should say. So I usually mark things with exclamation points. And then the other thing, make sure that you mention that you want it as an artifact, so it will kick it off to the right and not include it in the thread, okay? And I said, okay, it's created the SOP. I marked things with an exclamation point. Let's take a look and see what it's come up with. SOP for greenhouse diversification implementation. Awesome. So then you can see my outline there. Process name, greenhouse crop diversification, phase 1. And this is crazy because it did this whole extensive phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 process. It was like a 3 or 4 page artifact that it kicked out for me. So phase 1 is a 6-month implementation, and it actually broke it out into week numbers. I didn't say anything about week numbers this whole time, but it knew as a greenhouse production manager that they use week numbers. So sure enough, by week 13 through 24, 6-month time frame, it has full production and sales integration for the vegetable crop that we're introducing into an annual greenhouse. And then you can see right at the bottom there, it says oversight responsibility. It says IPM specialist. Need to confirm if current IPM specialist has herb and vegetable experience. I did not ask it to do that, but it knew that it didn't have that information, so it marked it with an exclamation point. And that is my flag to myself that I want to make sure that that is correct. So really, really cool and fun stuff that you can do with this. Okay, that was a lot. Take a deep breath. And again, start thinking about some of these questions that you have. I am going to dive into translation capabilities. But again, as I'm working through these examples, start thinking about what may fit with your company, what you have questions about AI in general, and then finally, we'll end on that live demo. Be really specific in translation. I'm going to say Spanish. Don't just say Spanish because there's 100 different versions of Spanish on our wonderful globe. So be very specific on what type of Spanish you want. And you can use prompt engineering to help. You don't have to with Spanish translation, but it really does help. So I'll say, okay, take this Friday late check SOP. Here is a snippet in English, and sure enough, all I said was, please translate this SOP into Spanish. That's all I said. And sure enough, it did it. That's cool, but we can get a little more detailed than that. Then I said, oh, that's interesting. Well, I have, we have employees here that translate things into Spanish. So I said, oh, well, I actually have that one. I'm going to feed that one in and see what it says about comparing this version to what it came up with. And it said, oh, yeah, I see several key differences. They kept some English words in there. And then it says this version likely better reflects the actual language in day-to-day US greenhouses. Mix of English and Spanish terms. Awesome. That's very cool for it to see that difference. And I can actually use that as I develop more Spanish translation. So let's make it a little more complicated. I said, Floral, you are an editor that specializes in generative AI capabilities. I'm going to, backtrack just a sec. This is just an SOP that we came up with as an example. So here's a Q&A. I said, hey, mark things if they're inaccurate. If you look at that X, it says translating to Spanish if needed. And it says, note, well, AI can assist with translation is recommended to have a professional translation review for official SOPs. This is why I love AI. It gives me the role to give it. Whenever it says it can't do anything or it's not good at doing something, I make it do that thing as its new role. And it actually does really, really well. So let's do that. Role 2. You are a professional Spanish translator, specializing various Mexican dialects. So take this Q&A and translate it into Mexican Spanish. Note any dialectical differences in word usage. So sure enough, it translated it. And then it says, I'll translate this for you. Dialectical note, cargar is used in the majority of Mexico, but there's some regions that prefer to use subir or alimentar, so like to lift up or to, it's actually talking about upload here when you're talking about data, okay? So that's really, really fascinating that, first of all, it said it couldn't do it, and then I forced it to do it, and it actually does a really good job. Kind of fun. Okay, we got, let's do this. I'm going to do about a 5-minute demo. And this is where I'm going to open it up to the audience. And we'll come up with something that we can do as a group here, okay? And I want to leave a good 10 or 15 minutes at the end that we can open it up to questions, all right? So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to jump into Claude. I'm going to click this, and I'm going to switch my share. All right. Okay, so we are set up. I am in a live version of Claude, and I am looking to the audience to give me an example of something that you learned today or an idea that you have that we can play around with Claude and see what it can do for us. So we can either do an SOP, we can do some kind of instructional manual. What do you have? Please share and Laura, if you would like to take a look too, we'll see what we can do. Perfect. So we have somebody asking about a greenhouse scouting SOP. This is perfect. Okay, so Claude and other AI user interfaces have different things that you can upload. So I'm going to click on this little paperclip. I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to go to this blank SOP template. Like I showed you in the example, blank SOP template. Awesome. And I'm going to dive into just a little bit of prompt engineering, just to see that, and then maybe we can play around with some translation or something. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a role, and I'm going to say IPM greenhouse specialist. And let's say IPM greenhouse specialist, let's say expert in insect ID and let's say symptom identification. In a controlled environment greenhouse, okay? So let's close that role. And then let's give it a task. Let's say develop an SOP with the template provided. And then I'm going to do a few other instructions. Mark any information you do not have with an exclamation. Let's say a red exclamation. Does that sound good? Thumbs up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Let's see what it does. Okay. There we go. So you can see that it generates the new document to the right there, and it has marked any facility-specific information with exclamation points, which is great. So then you can go through there and mark it with your team. And let's do a really quick kind of mental check on this. Okay. Objective, standard procedure. This is interesting. This is an SOP, and it says to establish a standard procedure for regular pest monitoring. Timeline, primary inspection, sticky traps. And again, I haven't given it any information on what an IPM greenhouse specialist does or is, and it picked out sticky traps, which is great. Some of the team members gathered necessary equipment, 10x handlers, awesome, microscope, sticky traps, alcohol swab sample bags, clean PPE. That's a little excessive in certain places, but this is pretty bonkers, right? Okay, now let's do this. Let's translate this into Mexican Spanish, okay? So I'm going to do a new role. um, um, this is a fun one. So role, professional Spanish translator, expert in Mexican Spanish and Spanglish used in US greenhouses. Let's take a look. Close that up. Let's go task. I'm going to say translate the SOP artifact, because if I say translate the SOP, I want to make sure that it knows that it needs to translate the artifact and not the, if I go to the chat controls, you can see the difference between artifact and content. And I want to make sure that I tell it to translate the artifact, okay? Close that up. And let's see what it does. So then it also says using MIP instead of IPM, which is interesting, EPP instead of PPE, and then POE instead of SOP. So that's kind of fun, right? It picks out those things. And then, you know, it says red exclamation marks have been maintained. And you can actually then put in new marks, and you can actually ask it to question some of these dialectical differences. So we are coming up on about, 10, 15 minutes left in this webinar. So I want to stop this share. I'm going to jump back onto my presentation. And we are going to open it up for questions. So I hope you found this insightful, informational, hopefully a little bit of entertaining as well. But I hope you were able to take something out of this. And yeah, let's open it up for questions.
Aaron, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Before we jump into our Q&A, I want to encourage everyone here to join us later this month for our next GrowPro webinar on February 25th. And that's with Chris Rochelot from Phoenix Foliage on automation ROI, tips to maximize profit, company buy-in, and worker satisfaction. And the link to register will be dropped in the chat. So now let's get back to the Q&A. So one question that I had was, who owns the material that the AI produces?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've had this at a few different talks. You know, these these user agreements are, a lot of us just click through them. But especially with something like this, it's good to look into it and see what the AI policies are. I've looked specifically into Claude, and it does state that whatever prompts you put in and whatever documents you upload are yours. They are your property. And then it also says something basically saying we give you the right to anything it generates, which is really cool. So you own what you upload and you own what it outputs as well. There's one caveat to this, is that if you give any feedback in any of these AI systems, any of these AI user interfaces, either a thumbs up, thumbs down, hey, this worked, this didn't, they are then saying, hey, you've given me feedback. Now we can take this information and use it to create future products and services. Basically, they're going to take that information and create a better model in the future. So yeah, it's good to know. It's good to know what is yours and what is not, and what they can use and what they can't.
And kind of going along with that, what do AI companies do with the prompt material?
Sure. So yeah, the prompt and material, it stays in your, you set up a user profile, right? So the prompt and material stays in the user profile until you click that, thumbs up, thumbs down. So in the beginning, when I was playing around with this, and I did not use either, never use company information. That gets into coding and tools and some of those other things that I may do later. But try to stay away from company information, and then really the prompt information stays in your user profile until you click that thumbs up, thumbs down. Earlier, when I was just doing generic stuff, I did thumbs up, thumbs down. But once I got into company processes and things like that, I stopped doing that, right?
That's really good to know. Are you using free or paid versions of these tools?
Oh, thank you. Start out free, definitely. You will hit limits fairly quickly, but just the next step up, the next paid version, the one that I showed you today is $20 a month. So it's really not that much. I found that I was trying to do some fairly hefty things, and I was hitting my limits fairly quickly, either for the day or for the length of the chat. And this really comes into play, especially when you get into coding and the length of the code that you're writing for a small analytical tool. But yeah, if you're using a free version, you'll find that sometimes it gets frustrating. The more and more you want to do things, the more frustrated you'll get with the free version. So $20 a month, I mean, that's peanuts.
Do you notice like a quality difference in addition to the limits with the chat? Do you notice that the quality of the artifacts or the code are better with the paid version as well?
No, um, the quality doesn't change if from free to upgrade. But what you can do is your prompts can be better and longer, right? So once you get into prompt engineering, that will give you better responses.
We have a question in the chat. What are some other good resources to learn how to use AI in the greenhouse industry?
There are not many. There are not many out there. I will be honest with you. It's really funny because like I am in a pretty unique position to be able to play around with this kind of stuff, and I am not finding very much at all. There are there are resources from ERP system software that's buy it off the shelf, that kind of thing. They're starting to integrate some AI into their products. But really there's not very much out there at all. What I have worked on is I'm gleaning from the AI industry and applying that to the greenhouse. And every time I give a talk like this, people say that they haven't heard this before, like connected to the hort industry or the greenhouses. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep being an advocate for AI in the horticulture industry, and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, it's pretty scant out there. So I would say find resources on how to use AI in small businesses, maybe, and then you can take that information and apply it to your greenhouse.
Awesome. So we have about 5 minutes left. Somebody had written in the chat to do a live example of a defoliation manual. Do you think you have time to do that? Or should we see if we get any more questions? Oh, here's
Sure.
one. Have you used pictures to make decisions, like a good cutting versus a bad cutting?
Sure. So this gets into a whole different ballgame when you're starting to talk about image recognition. So a few different things here. Once let's talk about SOP. Okay, good cutting versus bad cutting. Um, when you develop, let's say you develop an SOP using AI, you can always go back in and input your own, like if you want to put let's say a proprietary table of information, you can go ahead and put that in the SOP. Same with pictures, right? If you have your own pictures, you can put that into an SOP after the fact. But if we're talking about uploading pictures and having the AI identify, a good cutting versus a bad cutting, um, this gets into the weeds like real quick, because then you're talking about spinning up your own AI model, and it's no longer an LLM, but it's actually machine learning with image recognition. And then you have to have a huge data set. You have to go through the training process with, hey, this is a good picture, this is a bad picture. It gets into AI training, and that gets really complicated really quickly. And then you have a huge, subscription for, cloud-based storage. Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame.
One question, can AI rewrite its own code?
Ooh. This is fun. No, AI cannot rewrite its own code. Think about like how your brain works, right? You can't consciously decide to like rewire neurons in your brain. AI is the same way. It doesn't have access to its own code, but it does do something very cool. It learns, right? So there's these uh, um, basically there's these little vectors, right? There's these nodes in the AI software that gives a weight to the importance of a process. And in that respect, it can quote unquote rewire or rewrite how it's thinking about things, but it can't dive into its own code and rewrite. It can write code, which is really cool. I've worked on that a little bit, but no, it can't rewrite its own code.
So if we don't have any more questions, I think maybe what we can do is we'll just keep this open for a few more minutes. It might go after 2. If you have to leave, that's okay. But maybe Aaron, you could show us, do the defoliation instruction manual.
I'm going to jump back onto Claude. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new chat. Okay. And I'm going to look at this. Defoliation instruction manual. Trying to figure out a few more details on that. I'm wondering. Defoliation as it pertains to insect damage or nutrition or environmental factors. Let's just put all those in, okay? Let's say based on 3 factors, let's say insect damage, what I say, environmental issues, and let's say nutrient deficiencies. Sorry for my spelling. And then let's go ahead and upload that blank SOP again. Sorry, I'm trying to type really fast and get this done before. Okay, fill in the blank SOP as an artifact. Let's see what it does. So, very, very scant information provided to it, and then it will, it gives you what you're asking, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that is one last exam live demo there. And again, make sure that like just don't take it for what it's, take it for what it's worth, right? Don't think it's an expert, but review the SOPs that it's given you. And the more information that you can give it, the more accurate your SOP will be. And then, make sure that, like, I always like to, like, give it a chance to, like, give me more information outside of that SOP template, because there may be something that you might be missing as well.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation and for showing that. And I don't believe we have any more questions. Thank you for the comments in the chat.
Yeah,
So
thanks so much.
I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our Grow Pro webinar series. As I said, please be sure to join us later this month for Chris Rochelot's presentation on automation ROI. He'll have some really good information, just like in this webinar. And you can register for that at endowment.org/growpro. While there, you can check out our past webinar recordings, other grower-related resources, and research reports available to you for free, thanks to industry support. We ask that you please complete the brief survey about today's session, where you can suggest additional topics and help us continue to improve these webinars. Thanks again, and have a great day.